What if I told you that having $2,000 sitting in a savings account could give you the same peace of mind as having $2 million invested? Now, before you roll your eyes, I'm not saying these two things are financially equal. They're not. Not even close. A person with $2 million invested has generational wealth, retirement security, and real options in life. A person with $2,000 in savings has $2,000 in savings. But here's what's wild: the peace of mind, that feeling of being able to breathe, to sleep at night, to look at your life and say, I'm going to be okay. Research shows those two very different financial situations can produce almost the same emotional result. And once you understand why that's true, it might completely change the way you think about your own money. Where this research comes from. This isn't a motivational quote someone made up. This comes from Andy Reid, head of investor behavior research at Vanguard, one of the largest investment companies in the world. He spent a decade studying emergency savings and financial well-being, and he recently shared a finding that stopped me in my tracks. Vanguard ran what they called the Money Attitude Survey. Over 4,000 real investors, real data, real feelings about money. And what they found was striking. People who had at least $2,000 set aside specifically for emergencies reported financial well-being that was 21% higher than those who didn't. And that 21% bump? It was comparable in size to the well-being boost you'd get from having $1 million in financial assets. Reid himself called it mind-boggling, and he's the one who ran the study. An economist would hear this and shake their head. There's no logical reason $2,000 should feel anything like $1 million. But Reid's whole point is this: we don't experience money mathematically. We experience it emotionally. And those two things often tell us very different stories. Reason 1. Liquidity feels safer than wealth. Here's something that surprised me about the Vanguard data. Remember, these are Vanguard investors, people who, by definition, have money invested. And yet, among those with under $250,000 in investable assets, 65% reported financial stress. Okay, that tracks. But watch what happens as wealth increases. $250,000 to $500,000, still 56% stressed. $500,000 to $1 million, 50% stressed, and actual millionaires, people with over $1 million in investable assets, 29% still feel financially stressed. 1 in 3 millionaires, despite everything they've built, still feel anxious about money. Why? Because wealth on paper and money you can actually reach are two completely different things. If your money is locked in a 401k, there are taxes and penalties standing between you and it. If it's in a brokerage account, you're terrified of selling at the wrong moment. And when your car breaks down on a random Tuesday, your investment portfolio feels 1,000,000 miles away. A dedicated cash buffer answers the question your portfolio can't. Can I handle today? Reason 2, it quiets your nervous system. Andy Reid made a point that I think applies to virtually every person watching this. He said unexpected expenses aren't a might happen, they're a will happen. Your hot water heater will break, your car will need repairs, a health scare will come, a job situation will change. This is not pessimism, it's just life. And the human brain is wired around one very specific survival question: can I handle a surprise tomorrow? When the answer is no, your nervous system stays on low-level alert. It's like a background hum of anxiety you can never fully turn off. But when the answer is yes, when you know that whatever comes your way, you have a buffer, something in your brain actually settles down. The money doesn't need to fund your retirement. It doesn't need to cover a year of expenses. It just needs to be enough to confidently answer that one question. And $2,000 for many people is enough to do exactly that. Reason 3, the label does the work. This is the one that really gets me. Mental accounting is the idea that we don't treat all money equally, even when it's the same dollar amount. We put money into mental buckets depending on what it's for, and those labels change how we feel about it. Retirement savings gets labeled future money. It feels like it belongs to a different version of you. Home equity feels locked away and sacred, but an emergency fund? That gets labeled one thing, safety. And here's the key insight from Reed. The exact same $2,000 sitting in a retirement account does almost none of what an emergency fund does emotionally. The money is identical. The feeling is completely different because it's the label that creates the sense of security, not the account balance. When you draw a circle around that money and say, this is for emergencies, you've done something that no investment return can replicate. You've created a psychological safety net, and that net changes how you walk through your daily life. Reason 4, control beats magnitude. So much of financial anxiety isn't really about the numbers. It's about feeling vulnerable, feeling like you're one bad break away from a spiral you can't stop. A small, accessible buffer changes that dynamic entirely. It puts you back in the driver's seat. And Vanguard's data backs this up in a striking way. They asked investors whether they agreed with the statement. I usually feel pretty sure my life will turn out the way I want it to. Among those who agreed, who felt a sense of control, only 38% were stressed. Among those who disagreed, 65% were stressed, nearly double. And it had nothing to do with account size. It was entirely about whether they felt in control of their own outcomes. That's the real power of the emergency fund. It's not the $2,000, it's the agency the $2,000 represents. What this doesn't mean. I want to be very clear here, because this is where people can hear the wrong message. A $2,000 emergency fund and $1 million invested are not interchangeable. They solve completely different problems. $1 million in investments answers the long-term question, will I be okay in 30 years? It funds your retirement. It builds a legacy. It gives you real options. The emergency fund answers the immediate question, will I be okay if something goes wrong next week? You need both. And if you don't yet have an emergency fund, building one might be the single highest return move you can make, not financially, but emotionally. The research suggests that going from $0 to $2,000 in earmarked savings produces a well-being upgrade comparable to becoming a millionaire. You will almost certainly never find a deal that good anywhere else. Your sense of financial security doesn't come from the size of your portfolio alone. It comes from liquidity, predictability, and control. Build those into your plan on purpose. Keep money that feels safe. Keep money that's labeled as safe. Keep money within reach, because when you're a calmer investor, you're a better investor. $2,000 is not the same as $2 million, but it turns out buying yourself peace of mind is a lot more affordable than most of us ever realized.